My name is Rachel, and I am 29 years old. The morning the IRS letter arrived, I was sitting at my kitchen table grading papers and drinking my second cup of coffee. The envelope looked ordinary enough, but the words inside rearranged my entire life. According to the Internal Revenue Service, I owed $327,000 in unpaid taxes from a business I had never started, loans I had never taken, and income I had never earned. My hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. As the truth slowly revealed itself over the following weeks, one name kept surfacing. My older brother, Derek. The person who taught me to ride a bike, who walked me to school every morning through 6th grade, who I believed would never hurt me. Before I tell you how this nightmare unfolded and what happened when I finally confronted him at our father's 65th birthday party in front of our entire family, let me know where you are watching from. Drop a like and subscribe if you have ever been betrayed by someone you loved unconditionally. What happened next at that birthday dinner changed everything. Life before that letter was simple, and I was proud of that simplicity. At 29, I was a high school English teacher in Austin, Texas. I taught juniors and seniors at Westlake High, and while the salary was never going to make me rich, it was honest money that I stretched carefully. My apartment was a one-bedroom off South Lamar, $1,200 a month. Small, but mine. I had lived there for 4 years, and every corner reflected the discipline that defined my adult life. Financial stability had been my religion since college. I graduated from UT Austin with $32,000 in student loans and a determination to never feel financially vulnerable again. For 8 years, I packed lunches, skipped vacations, drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and put every spare dollar into savings. By the time that IRS letter arrived, I had accumulated $51,000 toward a down payment on my own home. My credit score was 812. I checked it on the first of every month like clockwork. That number represented nearly a decade of sacrifice, and I guarded it fiercely. My family was a different story. My parents separated when I was 10 and Derek was 14. Dad moved across town and remarried within a year. Mom raised us mostly alone in our modest house in Round Rock, working as a dental hygienist during the day and picking up bookkeeping clients on weekends. She was exhausted all the time, and that exhaustion shaped how she parented us differently. Derek was the firstborn, the son, the one who reminded her of Dad in all the ways she still loved despite the divorce. He was charismatic and athletic. The kind of kid who could talk his way out of any detention and charm any teacher into an extension. When he struggled in school, Mom hired tutors she could not afford. When he wrecked his first car at 17 driving recklessly, she replaced it before Dad could find out. When he dropped out of business school after 3 semesters, she told everyone he was taking a gap year to find his passion. I, meanwhile, became invisible in the way that responsible children often do. I made honor roll without celebration. I earned a full academic scholarship to UT, and my mother acknowledged it with a brief congratulations before pivoting to concerns about Derek's latest failed venture. I did not resent this dynamic as a child. I simply accepted it as the natural order. Derek needed more attention because Derek struggled more. My competence was both my gift and my curse. The reason no one worried about me and the reason no one noticed when I needed help. As adults, the gap between us widened. While I built my career slowly and deliberately, Derek bounced between schemes. He sold insurance for 6 months, managed a vape shop that closed within a year, tried day trading with money borrowed from our father, and briefly partnered with a friend on a food truck that never passed its health inspection. Each failure was explained away with grandiose narratives about timing, bad partners, or market conditions. Never once did Derek acknowledge that the common factor in all his failures was himself. Through it all, our mother defended him. "He's finding his way," she would say whenever I expressed concern about his lifestyle. "Not everyone follows the same path, Rachel. You are too rigid sometimes." The implication was clear. My steady paycheck and growing savings account were admirable but boring. Derek's chaos was somehow more authentic, more alive. 3 times in the past 4 years, Derek had borrowed money from me. $2,000 here, $3,000 there, always with promises of repayment that evaporated like morning fog. The last time, 8 months before the letter, he called me crying, saying he was about to lose his apartment. I transferred $5,000 to him that evening. I never saw a penny returned. About 6 months before the IRS letter, Derek invited me to lunch at a nice restaurant downtown, the kind of place I would never choose for myself. He looked different. New clothes, an expensive watch, a fresh haircut that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He was practically vibrating with excitement. "I finally did it, Rack," he said, using the nickname only he used. "I started my own consulting firm. Business strategy and development. We have 3 clients already and 2 more in the pipeline." I set down my fork. "That is great, Derek. What kind of consulting exactly?" He waved his hand vaguely. "Corporate stuff, operational efficiency, growth modeling. My business partner Victor handles the technical side. I bring in the clients and manage relationships." Victor. I had never heard this name before. Who is Victor? Incredible guy. Former McKinsey consultant. We met at a networking event last year. He saw my potential and wanted to partner up. He put up most of the initial capital. Something about the story felt rehearsed. The way Derek's eyes shifted slightly when he mentioned Victor, the vagueness of the business description. But Derek had always been a dreamer, and I had spent a lifetime watching his enthusiasms flare and fade. This was simply the latest iteration. "When can I meet him?" I asked. "He travels constantly. Singapore, London, Dubai. He is building our international presence." Derek leaned forward conspiratorially. "Between you and me, we are looking at first-year revenue north of $500,000. I am telling you, this is the one." Over the following months, Derek's apparent success elated. He moved into a much nicer apartment. He started posting on social media about business dinners and client meetings, always alone or with people I did not recognize. He bought a new car. Each time I saw him, he was wearing something expensive and name-dropping clients and deals that I could never verify. Mom was thrilled. She called me regularly to share updates about Derek's success, her voice carrying a vindication that stung. "See? I always knew he would figure it out. He just needed time to find the right opportunity." I told everyone he was special. I wanted to be happy for him. I tried. But the math never added up. 6 months ago, Derek could not pay rent. Now he was supposedly running a consulting firm with international reach. I pushed the doubts aside, telling myself I was being judgmental, that my own cautious approach to life was not the only valid one. How catastrophically wrong I was. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in March. I remember because Tuesdays were my light days, only 3 class periods, and I had come home early to catch up on grading. The envelope from the IRS sat on top of a stack of junk mail. I opened it casually, expecting something routine. "Dear Rachel Wynn," it began. "This letter is regarding unpaid federal tax obligations totaling $327,412 associated with Apex Dynamics LLC, EIN number following. Registered under your name and social security number." I read it 3 times. Each time the words made less sense. Apex Dynamics LLC? I had never heard of it. I had never started a business. I had never registered an LLC. My first call was to the IRS directly. After 40 minutes on hold, a representative confirmed that Apex Dynamics LLC had been registered in my name 14 months earlier in the state of Texas. The company had taken out a small business administration loan of $280,000, opened business credit lines totaling an additional $60,000, and had filed no tax returns despite significant reported income flowing through its accounts. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Someone had used my social security number, my clean credit history, and my identity to create a shell company and load it with debt. The representative suggested I pull my full credit report immediately. What I found when I did made me physically ill. My credit score had plummeted from 812 to 491. Beyond the business debts, there were 2 personal credit cards I had never opened, maxed out at their combined limit of $28,000. There was a car loan for $42,000 on a vehicle I had never seen. Every fraudulent account used my social security number but listed addresses I did not recognize, all in the Austin area. The pattern was unmistakable. Whoever had done this had access to my most sensitive personal information and intimate knowledge of my financial history. The applications referenced my employment at Westlake High, my salary, even my savings account balance. Only someone very close to me could know these details. and then I saw the registered agent for Apex Dynamics LLC. The physical address listed was Derek's new apartment. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I sat on my bathroom floor for 20 minutes, alternating between dry heaving and crying. My brother. My own brother had systematically stolen my identity to fund a fantasy business empire that apparently existed only as a vehicle for fraud. The next morning, I walked into the office of Catherine Park, an attorney specializing in identity theft and financial fraud. Her practice was in a modest building near the courthouse, her walls covered with legal degrees and client testimonials. She reviewed my documentation with an expression that grew grimmer with each page. "This is extensive and deliberate," she said finally. "Whoever did this had a sophisticated understanding of the credit system, the business formation, the SBA loan, the staggered credit applications. This was not impulsive, it was planned over months. It was my brother," I said. The words tasted like poison. Catherine nodded slowly. "Family cases are the most painful and unfortunately the most common." She explained my options with clinical precision. Without a police report, I would remain personally liable for every dollar of debt. The IRS would pursue me for the unpaid taxes. The SBA would seek repayment of the loan. My credit would remain destroyed indefinitely. With a police report, we can begin the process of establishing fraud. But I want to be honest with you, Rachel. Even in the best-case scenario, we are looking at 12 to 18 months to fully clear your name. And if your brother contests the charges or claims you authorized him to use your information, it could take even longer. The weight of that timeline settled on me like wet concrete. 18 months. A year and a half of my life, dedicated to undoing damage I did not cause. My down payment savings would likely be consumed by legal fees. My home buying plans were dead. I tried calling Derek that evening, straight to voicemail. I texted him, "I know about Apex Dynamics. Call me now." Hours passed, nothing. The next morning, nothing. By the third day of silence, my shock had calcified into something harder and more useful, a cold, determined anger. I drove to the police station and filed a report for identity theft, forgery, and fraud. Detective Marcus Webb, a methodical man in his 50s with reading glasses perpetually pushed up on his forehead, was assigned to my case. He listened to everything without interrupting, took copies of all my documents, and then asked a question that stopped me cold. "Do you have any idea what your brother actually did with the money?" I did not. But over the following 2 weeks, working with Detective Webb and doing my own digging, the full picture emerged. And it was worse than I had imagined. Derek had not used the money to start a real business. There were no clients, no consulting contracts, no international operations. Victor, the supposed former McKinsey partner, did not exist. I searched every professional database, every LinkedIn profile, every business registry. No Victor matching Derek's description had ever worked at McKinsey or any other consulting firm. The money had gone to online gambling. Detective Webb traced transactions from the Apex Dynamics business accounts to multiple offshore gambling platforms. Over 14 months, Derek had deposited and lost approximately $260,000 on sports betting and online poker. The expensive clothes, the watch, the car, those were purchased during winning streaks that never lasted. The fundamental trajectory was always downward, always toward ruin. A former friend of Derek's named Justin, who contacted me after hearing through mutual connections that something was wrong, filled in additional details. He had been running a side hustle borrowing from friends, Justin told me over the phone. Told everyone he was investing their money in his firm. I gave him $8,000. My buddy Carlos gave him $12,000. We started comparing notes when none of us could get him to return calls. It was the same playbook Heather had run in the original story I had heard about on a podcast years ago. Take from one to pay another, build an illusion of success, and hope the house of cards stays standing. But Derek had needed a bigger foundation for his scheme, and that foundation was my identity, my pristine credit score, my years of careful financial discipline stolen and burned through in virtual casinos. The confrontation I had been dreading came not on my terms but on my mother's. She called me on a Thursday evening, her voice brittle with barely controlled fury. "What have you done, Rachel?" I was momentarily confused. "What do you mean?" "Derek just called me from a payphone. He said police came to his apartment. He said you filed charges against him. Against your own brother. Mom, he stole my identity. He opened a business in my name and racked up over $300,000 in debt. He used my social security number to take out loans and credit cards. My credit is destroyed. He told me he was going to tell you about it. He said you two had an arrangement. A lie was so brazen I almost laughed. We had no arrangement. I had no idea until the IRS sent me a letter saying I owed them $327,000. My mother's tone shifted to the familiar pleading quality she always deployed when asking me to absorb Derek's mistakes. Can we not handle this within the family? He is your brother. He made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to return a borrowed book, Mom. This is felony identity theft. There is a federal loan involved. This is not something that goes away with a family meeting. If your father finds out, it will kill him. You know how proud he is of Derek. The irony was suffocating. Even now, even faced with evidence of criminal behavior, her instinct was to protect Derek, not from the consequences of his actions, but from the inconvenience of anyone knowing about them. What about me? I asked, my voice cracking for the first time. What about my credit score that took me 8 years to build? What about my savings that will go to lawyers instead of a house? What about the fact that I might lose my ability to rent an apartment or finance a car because of what he did? You will figure it out. You always do. Derek is more fragile. I hung up. It was the first time in my life I had ended a call with my mother. Over the next several weeks, I worked with Catherine and Detective Webb to build the case while simultaneously beginning the agonizing process of disputing fraudulent accounts. I met with a financial recovery specialist named Andrea Kim, who had been recommended by my attorney. Her assessment was sobering. The SBA loan is the biggest challenge, Andrea explained, pointing to projections on her laptop. Federal debt does not disappear easily, even with a proven fraud case. We will need to file separate disputes with each credit bureau, contact every creditor individually, and prepare extensive documentation. Your brother's cooperation would speed this up enormously, but based on what you have described, I would not count on it. She was right not to count on it. Derek retained a lawyer and initially denied everything, claiming I had verbally authorized him to use my information for the business. His attorney sent a letter to Catherine suggesting the whole matter was a family misunderstanding that could be resolved privately if I withdrew the police report. I refused. And then my father's 65th birthday arrived. The party had been planned for months. My mother had reserved the back room at Longhorn Steakhouse in Round Rock, our family's traditional gathering spot for milestones. Invitations had gone out to 30 people, both grandparents on my mother's side, Uncle Ray and Aunt Deborah, Uncle Phil and his wife Tammy, my cousins Megan, Jason, and little Sophia, Mom's best friend Patricia and her husband Bill, Dad's brother Uncle Steve, who had remained close to our family despite the divorce, and of course Derek, who my mother confirmed would be attending despite the ongoing legal situation. She called me the week before. I hope you will behave yourself at your father's birthday, she said, the warning barely disguised. This is not the place for drama. Dad does not know about any of this, and I intend to keep it that way. I did not make any promises. The evening of the party, I dressed carefully. A simple navy blouse and dark slacks. Professional. Composed. I carried a birthday gift for my father, a first edition of a book he had always loved. Tucked inside my bag was a folder containing copies of the police report, the LLC registration with Derek's apartment as the registered address, the SBA loan documents bearing my forged information, the credit card statements, and the IRS letter. I had been carrying that folder everywhere for weeks. It had become a kind of armor. When I arrived at the restaurant, the party was already underway. Streamers and balloons, a banner reading "Happy 65th, Dad," familiar faces greeting each other with hugs and laughter. My father stood near the center of the room, looking genuinely happy, his arm around my stepmother, Karen. When he saw me, his face lit up. "There is my girl. Come here." I hugged him tightly, guilt already gnawing at what I knew might happen tonight. "Happy birthday, Dad." Derek arrived 20 minutes later, making an entrance as he always did. New blazer, confident smile, working the room like a politician. He shook hands, slapped backs, and accepted compliments on his supposed business success. Mom beamed at him from across the room. When our eyes met, something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe. Or calculation. He quickly looked away and did not approach me. Dinner was served family style. Steaks, baked potatoes, Caesar salad, garlic bread. The conversation was warm and nostalgic. Relatives sharing stories about Dad, teasing him about getting old, toasting his health. I participated minimally, laughing when appropriate, answering questions about school with practiced ease. Derek, meanwhile, was in peak performance mode. He held court at his end of the table, regaling Uncle Steve and Cousin Jason with stories about his consulting firm. "We just landed a contract with a logistics company in Dallas," he said confidently. "Victor and I are flying out next week to finalize the terms. Six-figure deal." I watched my mother nod approvingly, watched my grandmother pat Derek's arm with pride, watched my father listen with the quiet satisfaction of a man who believed his son had finally found success. Derek caught me staring and misread my expression as admiration. He raised his glass toward me. "You should let me introduce you to Victor's business partner, Rack. Smart guy. Has a place in Lakeway. You two would hit it off." The condescension was the final thread. The absolute audacity of sitting there, funded by my stolen identity, offering to set me up with an imaginary person's imaginary business partner, while my credit lay in ruins and my savings bled out to lawyers. I waited until dessert. My mother had ordered a custom cake. As the waitress set it on the table and everyone gathered close for the candles, I stood up. "Before we do the cake," I said, my voice steady and clear enough to cut through the chatter, "there is something important I need to share with the family." My mother's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with alarm. "Rachel, not now." "Yes, now. Because everyone in this room deserves to know the truth, especially Dad." I opened my folder and placed the IRS letter on the table. 2 months ago, I received this letter from the IRS informing me that I owe $327,000 in taxes from a business called Apex Dynamics LLC. A business I have never heard of, registered in my name without my knowledge or consent. The room went silent. My father set down his champagne glass slowly. I placed the LLC registration next to the letter. Apex Dynamics is registered at Derek's apartment address. The business took out an SBA loan for $280,000 using my social security number, my credit history, and my forged information. There are also 2 credit cards and a car loan I never applied for. My credit score has been destroyed. Every head in the room turned toward Derek. His face had gone completely white. "That is not," he started. I placed the police report on the table. "This is the police report unfiled. The investigation has confirmed that the money from the SBA loan and credit lines went primarily to online gambling accounts. There is no consulting firm. There are no clients. Victor does not exist." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the background music from the main dining room. My grandmother's hand had frozen halfway to her mouth. Uncle Ray was staring at Derek with an expression I had never seen before. My father looked like he had been punched. "Derek," my father said quietly, "is this true?" Derek's mouth opened and closed. His strategy visibly shifted in real time, the charm dissolving into something rawer and uglier. His eyes darted to our mother. "Mom, tell them it is a misunderstanding." My mother stood abruptly. "This is a family matter, Rachel. You had no right to do this here. At your father's birthday, of all places." "When would have been the right time, Mom?" I asked. "You told me not to bring it up. You told Derek it would stay quiet. Meanwhile, I am drowning in debt he created, and you are asking me to protect him. Again." Uncle Ray leaned forward. "Derek, $300,000 on gambling." "It was not like that," Derek said, his voice climbing. "I had a system. I was winning for a while. I was going to pay everything back before anyone noticed." "With what?" I asked. "You lost almost all of it. The accounts are empty. The loan is in default. The IRS is coming after me because your fake business used my name." My father pressed both palms flat on the table. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you been gambling?" Derek said nothing. My grandmother, 81 years old and sharp as a blade, spoke from the end of the table. Answer your father, Derek James. A few years? Derek mumbled. A few years. My cousin Jason shook his head slowly. Man, I lent you $4,000 last summer for an equipment purchase. For the firm. Me too, Uncle Steve said. $6,000 for office space, he told me. The room erupted. It turned out Derek had borrowed from nearly everyone present, always with specific business justifications, always with promises of repayment. Uncle Ray, $8,000. Cousin Megan, $3,000. My father himself had given Derek $15,000 6 months ago to hire a new employee. All of it was gone. All of it had been fed into the same bottomless pit of online gambling. Through the chaos, my mother kept trying to regain control. Everyone, please. This is not helping. We need to discuss this privately as a family. Aunt Deborah, who had been silent until now, turned to my mother with an expression of sad clarity. Linda, how long have you known about this? My mother faltered. I did not know the details. But you knew something. You knew Rachel filed a police report, and you asked her to drop it. The silence that followed was damning. My father looked at my mother with something I recognized as the same betrayal I had felt when I first saw Derek's address on the LLC documents. You knew, Dad said to Mom. You knew what he did to Rachel and you tried to cover it up. I was trying to protect this family, Mom said, tears streaming down her face. No, I said, and my voice was calm now, almost gentle. You were trying to protect Derek. The way you have always protected Derek. And the cost has always been mine. Derek made one final attempt. I will fix this. I will get help for the gambling. I will pay back everyone. Rachel, please, drop the charges. I am your brother. I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had taught me to whistle, who had carried me on his shoulders at the state fair, who had threatened to beat up a boy who made me cry in 7th grade. And who had then, systematically and deliberately, stolen my identity and gambled away my future. You have been my brother for 29 years, I said. And in all that time I have never once done anything to hurt you. I lent you money I could not afford. I defended you when people doubted you. I believed in you when you did not believe in yourself. And you repaid all of that by stealing the one thing I had built completely on my own. I gathered my documents. The police report stays. The investigation continues. What happens next is the consequence of your choices, not mine. I placed my father's birthday gift on the table. Happy birthday, Dad. I am sorry it happened this way, but you deserve to know the truth. I walked out of that restaurant into the warm Austin night, and for the first time in months, I could breathe. The aftermath unfolded over many months. Derek was arrested the following week and charged with identity theft, wire fraud, and federal loan fraud. The SBA involvement elevated the case to federal jurisdiction, which meant more serious potential consequences. He was held on $30,000 bail, which my mother posted by taking out a second mortgage on her house. He cooperated eventually. His attorney negotiated a plea deal that included 18 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised probation afterward, mandatory gambling addiction treatment, and full restitution to all victims, including me, the family members he had borrowed from, and the federal government. The day Derek reported to a minimum security facility in Bastrop, my mother called me for the first time in weeks. Are you happy now? She asked, her voice hollow. No, Mom. I am not happy. My brother is in prison and my credit is still destroyed. There is nothing about this situation that makes me happy. She hung up without responding. The financial recovery was exactly as grueling as Andrea had predicted. Each creditor required separate disputes with different documentation. The SBA loan required intervention from a congressional liaison after initial appeals stalled. The credit bureaus were slow and bureaucratic, requiring multiple submissions of the same paperwork. 6 months in, I had resolved about 40% of the fraudulent debt. The 2 credit cards were cleared relatively quickly. The car loan took longer because the vehicle had been repossessed and sold at auction, creating a deficiency balance that required additional legal proceedings to remove from my record. The SBA loan was the mountain. Even with the police report, Derek's confession, and his federal conviction, the bureaucratic machinery ground slowly. Catherine filed motion after motion. Andrea submitted dispute after dispute. I spent evenings after teaching composing letters, making phone calls, and organizing documents instead of grading papers or seeing friends. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Lena Okafor, who specialized in family betrayal and financial trauma. What struck me most about our early sessions was her observation that I had been performing the role of the invisible responsible child my entire life, and that Derek's fraud was, in a terrible way, the logical endpoint of a family system that had always assigned me the burden of stability while excusing his instability. You cannot control whether your family acknowledges this pattern, Dr. Okafor told me, but you can stop participating in it. Setting boundaries is not punishment. It is self-preservation. Those boundaries were tested constantly. Aunt Deborah became a surprising ally, calling regularly and sending care packages with notes that said simply, "You did the right thing." Uncle Ray quietly offered to help with legal expenses, an offer I declined but deeply appreciated. My father, after several weeks of processing, reached out with a long email that included an apology for not seeing what was happening sooner, and a promise to support me however he could. My mother was a different story. She aligned fully with Derek, visiting him weekly in prison and sending me occasional messages that oscillated between guilt trips and cold silence. Aunt Deborah told me Mom had been telling extended family that I had exaggerated the situation and that Derek's gambling was a disease, not a choice, as if those things were mutually exclusive. Other family members navigated the divide with varying degrees of grace. Some understood, some quietly withdrew from both of us, unwilling to take sides. I learned to accept that I could not control the narrative and focused instead on what I could control, my own recovery. 14 months after the IRS letter, Andrea called me with news that made me sit down on my classroom floor during lunch period. The SBA has formally acknowledged the fraud and discharged your liability for the loan, she said. The last credit card dispute was resolved last week. Your credit report is clean. I did not speak for a long moment. Clean, I repeated. Your score is at 753, not quite where you were, but well into excellent range. You were clear, Rachel. I cried at my desk for 10 minutes, then washed my face and taught my afternoon classes. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment with a glass of wine and allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had been taken from me and what I had fought to reclaim. Not just the credit score or the money, but my sense of self. My belief that I could weather anything if I stayed disciplined and honest. The financial recovery was real, but the emotional restoration was a longer road. My relationship with my mother remained strained. We spoke perhaps once a month, brief and careful conversations that avoided anything of substance. The warmth that had once existed between us, complicated as it was, had been replaced by a wary politeness that felt permanent. Derek served 12 months of his 18-month sentence and was released to a halfway house. He enrolled in a gambling addiction program and found work at a warehouse. His restitution payments began arriving, small amounts that would take decades to fully repay what he owed. I accepted this reality without bitterness. The money mattered less than the accountability. 3 months after his release, Derek called me. I almost did not answer. "Rachel," he said, and his voice was different. Smaller. Stripped of the performer's polish I had known my entire life. "Hi, Derek. I know you probably do not want to hear from me, but my counselor says I need to make amends to the people I hurt, and you are at the top of that list." I listened without interrupting. "What I did to you was unforgivable. I know that word gets thrown around, but I mean it literally. I am not asking you to forgive me because I do not think I deserve it. I stole from the one person who never stopped believing in me, and I did it because it was easy and because I told myself you would never find out. That is the worst part. I did not even feel guilty at the time. I just felt entitled." His voice cracked. "Mom always told me I was special, that I was meant for big things. And I believed it so deeply that when reality did not match the story, I thought the rules did not apply to me. Your credit score, your savings, your good name, I treated them like they were mine to use because I convinced myself I needed them more than you did." "Why gambling?" I asked. The question had nagged at me for over a year, because it felt like the shortcut I had been looking for my entire life. One big win and everything would click into place. But there is no such thing as one big win. There is just the next bet and the next loss and the lie you tell yourself that the next one will be different. We talked for almost an hour. He did not ask me to drop anything or minimize what he had done. He did not make promises about the future. He simply told the truth, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, about who he was and what he had done and why. At the end, he asked, "Do you think we will ever have a relationship again?" I thought about it honestly. I do not know, Derek. I am not closing the door, but I am not opening it wide either. You need to show me who you are now over a long period of time. Words are easy. You were always good at words. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Fair enough. That is more than I deserve." In the months that followed, I returned to the steady rhythm of my life, teaching, saving, rebuilding. My approach to financial security had evolved. I maintained accounts at 3 different institutions. I froze my credit reports and only unfroze them temporarily when needed. I subscribed to 2 separate credit monitoring services. These were not acts of paranoia, but of hard-won wisdom. My plan to buy a home remained alive, postponed but not abandoned. The $51,000 I had saved was now closer to $38,000, reduced by legal fees and months of financial turbulence. But it was growing again, slowly and deliberately, the only way I knew how. Dr. Okafor helped me understand that the experience, devastating as it was, had given me something valuable. Not just resilience, though I had discovered reserves of that I did not know existed, but clarity. I could now see the family patterns that had shaped me with painful precision. The invisible labor of being the responsible one. The tax levied on competence. The way love and obligation had been tangled together until I could not tell where one ended and the other began. Protecting yourself is not selfish, Dr. Okafor said during our final regular session. It is the foundation of every healthy relationship. You cannot love others well if you allow them to destroy you. I carry those words with me now. The betrayal that once seemed like the end of everything became, unexpectedly, a beginning. Not a happy ending tied with a bow, but something more honest than that. A clear-eyed understanding of who I am, what I am worth, and what I will and will not accept from the people I love. As I look back on this journey, I wonder how many of you have faced a similar crossroads. Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and protecting yourself? Have you ever discovered that the person you trusted most was the one causing the most damage? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to Steal Revenge for more stories of resilience and hard-won truth. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that setting boundaries with family is not betrayal, it is survival. Thank you for listening. And remember, the people who call you selfish for protecting yourself are usually the ones who benefit most from your silence.